Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the workshop. It's great to have you here because we ended off the last episode putting our sword in the oven for its first normalizing cycle. I'm thrilled that you're joining us on this fine day because in this episode, we're hopefully not going to break the sword in half. Which is what I also mentioned in the last episode, is we are a good little ways off the minimum length that we need for this quench tank. It is also nowhere near the diameter that we need to be able to fit these guard lugs in. So, what do we do? Seriously, what do we do?
We make one.
From what is the question that I have. We are short on materials. Wow, what a way to start an episode. Don't think I can make it from this. Don't think I can make it from that. Definitely won't work. This is definitely going to require a steel run. The thing is, I left the workshop in such a hurry, I didn't measure the width of the guard lugs. So I actually don't know what size I need. Okay, so I made it back. This is the piece of steel we got. We've got a 5.5 inch inside diameter, which is hopefully, oh my goodness, are you kidding me?
That's so bad. As per the drawing, the width here is 5 3/4 of an inch.
I don't feel so bad because this was the largest piece of steel that I could find there. But I do feel bad because, you know, maybe I would have looked harder if I had actually remembered to measure it. So here's my idea. This is going in the forge, and we're gonna try squishing it. See if squishing it gives it some extra width. While that big piece of tube is heating up, it's the perfect occasion to pull the blade out of the oven for its normalizing cycle number 1. It's at 1550 degrees. I'm gonna pull it out, hopefully not fall off this ladder, and then hang it up to air cool. Here we go. Didn't go super well. Let's have a look at what we need. That is 7 inches wide, and that is, oh my goodness, it is nowhere near. As the famous expression goes, when life gives you lemons, make art. Well, that looks like garbage.
Yes, much better. Art.
This is terrible. There were no lemons. There was no art. We have failure. A normalizing blade. And what I'm gonna do in the morning is I'm gonna have to fabricate up from like sheet or plate steel, a modification.
It's just gonna be a fabricated sheet metal modification to this bad boy.
So we can fill it up with enough oil. So we'll get to that in the morning. All right, it's the next morning. That blade is obviously cool. Time for normalizing cycle number 2. The idea is, after having forged this thing, it's full of irregular stresses. It also has a very large grain structure, and something with a large grain structure is way weaker than something with a fine grain structure. So by normalizing it, heating it up 1500 degrees or so, letting it air cool, you shrink that grain structure, you even out the stresses in the piece, hopefully meaning that it is a stronger blade that is also less, oh, that's loud, less liable to warp in the quench. So we're gonna throw this thing in. This is horrifyingly high. I'm at least 5 feet off the ground. And I tell you, I feel it. There we go. Right, so it's been pulled out and cooled down for normalizing cycle number 2, but it's picked up a slight warp to it. So I'm gonna straighten that before we go for normalizing cycle number 3. Oh boy, not far enough. Okay, it's incredibly difficult to do. I can see as it's cooling, it's developing more and more of a warp though. Getting a big warp on normalizing cycle number 3 generally lets me know that when we come to the quench, we're gonna get a big warp. So that is unfortunate. The trouble is, if I go ahead and straighten it now, there's a risk to what happens in the quench, because if I straighten it, I'm gonna stress out the material, and then gonna go into a quench, where that stressed out material is gonna affect it and do weird things. So, while that cools, we're gonna get onto our quench tank. We've got ourselves a piece of steel right here. We're gonna give it the old zappity zap. Let's do this! That's the best plasma cut I've ever made. Oh, easy. We actually don't even need that much oil. It's time to bring the oven up to temperature and quench the longest blade I have ever quenched. It's quenched. Now what I'm not gonna do is try and do any straightening after the quench because I'm gonna be stressed and this blade is way too long for it. If this is warped, we're gonna have to straighten it in the temper, and in preparation for the temper, I'm gonna lift this lid up to allow the oven to dump all its heat as fast as possible, because what you don't wanna do after you harden a blade is let it sit for a day before tempering it, because it can end up cracking. So you gotta harden it, and then as soon as you can, get it into the temper to relieve just all that stress that has been caused from the hardening.
Woo! That's not bad at all.
It is definitely not all the way straight, but it's up there with probably some of the straightest swords ever coming out of any quench I've ever done. So that is a great joy. Now we're gonna wipe the oil off it because we don't want to get all that oil gunk inside the oven. Put it in, and we're gonna do two-hour tempering cycles at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, there we go. We're gonna let this puppy have its tempering cycle. So while that's in the tempering oven, it's time for us to get back to the guard and start messing around with it. So after my terribly bad attempts at trying to TIG weld this, Will returned from SHOT Show. How was it?
It was so much fun. Got to hang out with some cool people, see some cool stuff, but I'm very happy to be back.
He got back and he was like, well, Alec, why didn't you MIG weld it? And I was all like, well, Will, that's not a very glamorous thing to MIG weld it. And then he was all like, well, it wasn't very glamorous to TIG weld it in the first place. And then, you know, I had to admit it wasn't very glamorous to even try soldering it in the first place. The most glamorous thing would have been to forge it out of one piece, but I wasn't able to forge it out of one piece. And so, MIG welding, it is. It's going to be strong, and it will look good once we clean up the welds. Ultimately, it's about fusing two bits of metal together, making it look neat at the end. We're going to make sure that happens.
The sword is hardened. Alec didn't snap it in half. I'm hugely impressed. This would be a very easy thing to snap in half because it's gymongous. That's the technical bladesmithing term for it.
So what are you gonna do?
So I'm gonna move into grinding the bevels. Before I face off anything else, I wanna get the bevels started at least so that I have a little bit more control over the plunge lines and all that good stuff. Slap a 984F Cubitron onto the Gibson and remove a little bit of weight.
While I am going to put the hole in the real guard with the milling machine, Will is gonna take our now mostly straight blade into the grinding room.
So let us know, Will, what on earth are you doing with this thing? How are you managing to cope grinding such a big blade?
Well, I'm trying to do it in the most efficient way possible. Unfortunately, I have no idea what that is. I started off with a 36 grit belt that we've been using for a very long time, since we were making the Damascus for it. And I use that because when you use fresh belts on these hard 90-degree edges, it just tends to shred off all of the grit. It's not good for anybody. So I started off with a used 36 grit belt, roughed in the bevels. I then switched to a used 60 grit, started playing around using a work rest, freehanding it on the flat platen, and then using a contact wheel. I think what I like the most is going at an angle on the flat platen, because it means that I don't have all of this weight hanging off out here, and I still got a pretty good amount of control over the blade.
So you've got about 10 knives worth of steel to remove?
Exactly. Yeah, this is a ton of bevel grinding. But
it's getting there, and it's also looking really straight, which is a hell of a challenge.
Time to get back in there and throw a fresh 36 grit on and remove a little bit more material.
Okay, so I milled this out. We have 2 different size holes, one for the top, one for the bottom. It's looking pretty good. I'm happy with how that went. Next step, of course, time to get a little loopy. I'm gonna cut these here and then proceed to file the ends of the loops and file the contact points of the guard so we get as clean as possible for MIG welding to the axle. Well, you've done a whole load of grinding today.
Yes, I think I ground off probably at least a pound or 2 from that thing.
This is now feeling incredible. It feels so whippy. You could slap a fool with this.
This sword slaps.
Oh my goodness. Do you see this, guys? The sound effects were not needed.
No.
But it's feeling amazing. This, when it's done, it's gonna feel nimble.
It is. And the amount of velocity that you have at the end of that tip, even from just moving it like that, it's crazy. This thing, it's gonna be light and nimble and so capable of just cutting like 3 or 4 people in half if you line them up just right.
On that horrifying note, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna call it for a video. So thank you guys so much for coming. I'm gonna end by thanking today's sponsor. As we end the video, folks, I'd like to thank you for supporting us at the Alec Steele Co. by buying the products that we offer and sell. When you're in the blacksmith or bladesmith workshops, the types of dusts that there are around can really be terrible for your lungs and your health long term. Getting lung cancer is not a good thing to have when you're 50, when otherwise you could have decades more life to go. And so don't risk it. Be able to make stuff for much longer by investing in quality personal protective equipment. This right here is the 3M6503QL half mast. You see this? You're able to latch it up and latch it down so that you can put it on way more easily. And also, once you're out of a dangerous area, you can pull it down to be able to communicate with somebody. The QL is hugely important. And so make sure that you never get a half mast that doesn't have that QL, because it makes it so much more comfortable and it makes you actually want to wear it. We sell this respirator as a bundle with 2 P100 filters. We are also soon going to be launching 3M VersaFlow spacesuits if you want to upgrade to some real deluxe PPE. If you hit the link in the description and you go to the PPE page of our website, you can register your interest and be the first to be notified when our VersaFlow spacesuits drop. And so drop your email in there so we can let you know when we've got them and when you can jump on them. We're gonna have a very small quantity to see if you folks like them. Of course, also, we have some earmuffs. These are our favorite 3M earmuffs. The X4As, incredibly slim and incredibly comfortable. And something that's so important with personal protective equipment is that it is of the quality that you want to wear it, because it's no good if it's just hung up, not being worn. So invest in the good stuff, and when you use code PROTECT for the next week, you can get 10% off all our pre-PE offerings. Thank you guys for watching this. Use code PROTECT at our website down below. Get yourself protected. See you on the next one. Bye-bye.